And without further ado, I will hand you over to our speaker today, Associate Professor Manaan Kar Ray. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fiona. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I stand. I live and work on the lands of the Yagara people, and I'd like to pay my respect to their elders past, present, and future, and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. So to begin with, I think it is important to say that suicide is a fairly emotive topic. I am a consultant psychiatrist. I'm a director of a psychiatric hospital. In my formative years as a psychiatrist, I lost a family member to suicide. When I was a medical student, I lost a friend to suicide. And in my professional career, I have lost patients that I've cared for to suicide. And every time I do one of these suicide prevention talks, it does bring out a lot of emotions in myself, and I'm fairly certain it will be the same for others who might have lost friends or family or have lost patients professionally. So I will kind of advise to kind of look after yourself, given it's an emotive subject. If you need to take a break, do take a break. I'll also kind of put my personal number on the chat, so you can get in touch with me through WhatsApp if you need to. If after the event you all wanted to discuss something, I'm more than happy to talk about things as well, whether that be kind of anything related to the topic that we are covering today, or if this has kind of brought up emotional things for you, I'm more than happy to kind of have a chat conversation on WhatsApp as well. So I'll put my mobile over there. So the suicidal mind is often trapped in an overwhelming sense of despair. Okay, so stemming from entrapment, suicide becomes a salient solution to life circumstances. So suicide is often conceptualized as an attempt to escape the entrapment of life. The pain is overwhelming, and suicide provides the promise of pain relief. Now, what we are doing today is presenting a snippet from a much larger program called Protect. We have one-day versions of this, 2-day, 3-day, and even 5-day versions of the program. And the entire Protect framework is based on a singular concept called relational safety. Okay, so it provides a novel approach to supporting people in suicidal distress. And many might say that relational safety is not a novel approach. It goes back to the times of Carl Rogers and kind of client-centered therapy. Now, relational safety, as we think of it, can be thought of as a deeply empathic therapeutic alliance between the professional and the person in distress and their natural circle of support. There are two beautiful Zulu words. Excuse me. The first is Sawubona. It's a greeting, a hello, meaning we see you. Me and my ancestors see you, not just you, but you and your ancestors, your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations. And in the process of seeing you, we bring you into being. So to create relational safety for a person, in suicidal distress, perhaps that is the way in which we need to see and listen to the person. So the relationship itself becomes the springboard for recovery and safety. This is captured in the second word, Ubuntu. I am because we are. So recovery is a journey of hope that is done together in partnership. This is the golden thread that runs through Protect, how to use the healing power of human relationship. How do we make a person in suicidal distress experience, truly experience Ubuntu? Prior to coming to Australia, so I'm in Brisbane now for the last 3 years. I was the clinical director in Cambridge. So a lot of the work that I'm talking about today comes from 323. It's a highly successful and internationally acclaimed service of inpatient and community crisis care. So we established that system in 2009, and so we started work on it in 2009. Got established in 2011, second round in 2014, and it has got some of the best scores of clinical efficiency and patient experience. and recovery principles are embedded into the fabric of care delivery. Pretty much people from all over the world come to see the 333 model and how it works. And 333 hosted the national award-winning Promise program. The focus was on reducing restrictive practice, in particular physical interventions, but it was done through focusing on patient experience. And these are some of the scores from that data set. As you can see, it's not 100, 200 surveys, it's 4,500 surveys. And the scores are a testament to what can be achieved by our frontline health professionals, our nurses on the ward. These are inpatient wards with people having lots of mental health challenges, in crisis, very unwell. 30 to 40% of them would be under the Mental Health Act at any point in time, and they don't want to be there. But you still kind of see scores of staff are polite and friendly. 98% of them agreed to that, made to feel welcome, 97%, involved in their care and treatment discussions, 98%. So a lot of the work around relational safety comes from 333 and Promise as to how we kind of truly engage people in crisis, truly engage people who are in suicidal distress. This is some data from the current hospital that I'm working in, Princess Alexandra Hospital. As you can see, in 2019, our length of stay in the emergency department was in that 16, 17, 18-hour range. And we rolled out 127, SAFE and 127 in December 2019. And this is what I'm going to be talking about primarily today, this particular component of Protect. And you can see what happened after that and how our length of stay decreased. And with these are the kind of numbers in 2020, where it was around 5.5 hours. And now we are under 4 hours, 3.5 hours length of stay. And what it shows is that we were keeping people in hospital, in the emergency department, which is not a very conducive environment for people in suicidal distress, just to get to a stage where they felt safe to go home. But actually, if you do good safety planning, you can help people kind of go back to their natural surroundings, where into the least restrictive setting. Now, these numbers are incredible, and you can see that comparator hospital, where there was over the same time frame no change, and you can see Princess Alexandra Hospital in red kind of going down quite significantly over that same time frame. And we have presented Protect all over the world. We're doing a significant amount of work in Peru at the moment, getting our entire work translated into Spanish. And they are available as books. So there is a guidebook and a workbook together, and then the guidebook and the workbook are available separately. So just as an overview, there are 3 large modules. The first is the core module, in which we introduce the concept of relational safety. So we use a number of innovative tools kind of through the care compass, pain relief optimization, a risk rethink, and empathy in action. We kind of help people completely change the way in which they approach risk and approach safety. And these theoretical constructs and practical conversation aids covers the delicate balancing acts that professionals need to master. Without risk, there is no recovery. How do you kind of take risks in a way which is measured and which is supportive, rather than people feeling completely left to their own devices? So that's the core module. The second module is the assess module. This is the largest module in there. And kind of it starts with promoting self-awareness regarding clinical decision-making, along with the assessment sequence. We do a huge amount of work in suicide phenomenology, starting from 1897, Emil Durkheim's model, all the way through to the ideation to action models that have come up. I think Rory O'Connor is speaking here, the integrated motivational volitional model, Joiner's model, the 3-step theory from Klonsky's group. So all the way to right up to the kind of contemporary models of suicide prevention. And we have a specific way in approaching suicide called STEPS, in which we kind of look at, what is the current step that the person is on, what is the source of their pain, what is the span of risk fluctuation, and what are the scenarios that might present in the coming days and weeks where you can actually meaningfully intervene. We also teach specific techniques of how to kind of elicit the information and how you strike a balance between my need as a clinician and a professional to gather all the data that is available and is needed to make good decisions, but also the person's need to listen to their narrative, feeling validated, and how you strike that balance between the professional's need and the person's need, and how that balance is struck in a time-efficient fashion. So we teach a range of techniques around that. We provide a very rapid safety formulation, takes less than 30 seconds to a minute once you do it, which kind of stops people from looking at the information that is just in keeping with their decision. And then we kind of help people kind of write up notes, documentation, safety documentation, which is meaningful and actually increases safety rather than a burden, and helps with bringing clarity to your thought processes regarding your decision making. So that's the assess module. And finally, a recovery module called Aspire that focuses on the person's strengths and assets. So acceptance of the person's ambivalence towards living enables a sequence of actions, which can be thought of in a chronological sequence with safety planning in the midst of a crisis. That's what we are going to focus on today, safety planning, followed by the delivery of person-centered care, kind of intervention, using an interventions menu, along with coping skills enhancing reviews and resilience building for the future. Okay, so those are the three modules: core, assess, and aspire. And there are 16 chapters. If I'll just show so like this is the guidebook, and in the guidebook they are laid out like that: core, assess, and aspire. And the books are very pictorial, kind of people who wanted the slides and stuff like that. That should be that's available from there. And there is the workbook as well, which has got the all the interactive exercises that we do in the training program. So like the Care Compass, which is one of the tools over there. Oh, I don't know what's going on here with the PDF documents. So today we are going to focus on one of those chapters, which is the SAFE chapter. I always tell people to kind of think of any training that they go on, but particularly Protect, as purchasing new clothes for an existing wardrobe. It does not mean that the old wardrobe has to be discarded, as a new suit might go very well with a shirt and tie from what already exists. So the knowledge and skills from SAFE and 1 to 7 or Protect generally will complement those that already exist in an experienced clinicians. And for beginners in mental health, or those who are not in mental health but are in healthcare, it will provide a solid foundation. Okay, so I'm just going to change presentations and go to, so just I'm going to use some slides from the assess module just to kind of pin the conversation to do with mindset shifts. So we all know risk is multifactorial, and wherever you're kind of working, there are a range of things that can affect risk. And there are three mindset shifts that we want to bring about in Protect. The first is to do with moving from a mindset of prediction of high, medium, and low to a mindset of prevention, right? This seems like a mute point, but it's really, really important, because when you are with a person, whether that be in a consulting room or on an inpatient ward or in an emergency department, your prediction of high, medium, low is only valid for the time frame the person is with you. Once they leave that room and they are on their own, to their own devices, and they're returning back to that place where the suicidal crisis emanated, risk can change in a matter of minutes. Okay, things can conspire where they come together, where the person might act again. So, and we do a lot of this in the core module where we look at risk formulation. So instead of thinking about high, medium, and low, actually, if someone is presenting in suicidal distress, circumstances could conspire very quickly for them to be at high risk again. So don't waste your time predicting high, medium, and low. almost treat everyone at high risk, ask the question, when might this person act again, and what can be done to stop them acting again, right? So that's the first mindset shift, moving from prediction to prevention. The second mindset shift is moving from the past to the future. Prevention is a future-focused activity. But if you look at your assessment, you would find that if you have a 1-hour assessment, 55 minutes of that are spent on the past. And if you're lucky, 5 minutes on the future. Of course, the past is important because the past tells you about the future, but have we got the balance right? So rather than asking what has happened so far, you need to kind of get to that point and ask the questions about when might this happen again? You know, those what if scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? If this happens, then what will happen? So thinking about the future, because you can't make the past safer, you can only make the future safer. And again, in risk formulation, we look at different ways in which we think about risk. Longitudinal risk, where you're comparing the person's risk over time, the person's own risk over time to their baseline, their worst point. Are they getting better or are they getting worse? Then we look at unaddressed risk, after safety planning, what is the risk that is still left unmitigated? And then we look at cross-sectional risk, where you are looking at risk where, how does this person's risk compare to the risk of defined populations, like those who are in an inpatient setting, those who are in your secondary care community setting, those who are in your GP primary care. Is the risk higher than that population or lower than that population? And based on that, you kind of decide how to intervene, because this gives you an opinion about clear and imminent risk, because that's the only time you can actually meaningfully intervene. You can't meaningfully intervene about risk in 6 months' time or a year's time or 6 years' time. You can only meaningfully intervene in the next week, maybe if you stretch it to the next month. That's where you can have a meaningful impact. But we cover a lot of that again in the core module, in the risk rethink. That's where we cover a lot of that. But moving from the past to the future, getting your balance right. And the third thing that we need to shift in our assessment processes is moving from deficits to assets. We have an assessment process where we are obsessed with establishing what's the matter with you. Okay, fair enough. Diagnosis, symptoms, these are important because these are opportunities for intervention. And we really have to move from what's the matter with you to what matters to you. Because not only does what matters to you gives you the source of the psychological pain which can be chipped away at, or you can help the person improve their tolerance to it, because you don't get suicidal about the neighbor's dog. You get suicidal about the things that deeply, deeply matter to you. So in your assessment process, if you're not establishing what matters to the person, you can't get to the heart of the pain. Also, in the same vein, if you're not establishing what matters to the person, you will not establish the source of hope, because it's the people and purpose in the person's life which gives them hope. And that's what keeps them safe. Particularly if you look at the community where the person is on their own, right? Even if they are being seen once a week. So 160 of the 168 hours, 167 and a half hours, the person is on their own. You may be there for half an hour or maybe an hour. So the person has to manage their safety, draw on their own strengths, their own assets, their own natural circle of support to maintain their safety. But if you're just focusing on the deficits and hardly anything on the assets, how do you help the person connect the dots about how they will manage their safety? Okay, I hope this makes sense, because these three mindset shifts are absolutely crucial to this concept of relational safety. And we cover a lot of this as to how you bring alive, what are the behavioral changes, what are the practice changes that you need to bring about in your assessment process. How does that look like? What does that mean in the assess module? But keep this at the back of your mind, because SAFE is what we are going to cover today. Right. Okay. So now we've jumped into the Aspire module. This is the second chapter in the Aspire module, which is to do with safety planning. There are kind of 4 components that we discuss. but in busy settings, it may be quite difficult to do a full-blown safety plan. However, it is possible to have what we call a safety conversation. So you can, which is the 127, and I'll spend some time talking about 127, and depending on how we're doing for time, we will go through the different components of SAFE as well. So what the 127 is, it is a way of systematically focusing on the first hour, 2 days, and 7 days. So 127 constructs, sorry, my Teams notifications are coming up regarding work. So 127 constructs relational safety in the moment. So in the interaction, in the genuine display of curiosity and the desire to support and help. So 127 in itself is not the safety plan, but it is the conversation from which the safety plan will emanate. Or it is the conversation which brings the safety plan to fruition, depending on where you're working. So if you're working in an inpatient ward and you have had a lot of time, you might have done the full SAFE over the last week or 10 days. And 127 is the conversation you have at the point of discharge. If you are working in an emergency department, 127 may be the first safety conversation that you have, where you manage to get kind of lay down the foundation of safety planning, but then a full kind of safety plan has to be done at a later time, depending on which setting you're working in. So also we repeatedly say, and I'm not covering this in the talk today, about the different aspects of safety planning. The conversation is as important, if not more, than the plan itself. So in the full course, we talk about presence, process, practice, and then the plan. So the presence is one of relational safety, kind of being present in the person's life, truly present. The process is one of guided discovery. You may have all the answers, but please don't give the answers. Help the person connect the dots. And the practice is one that is solution focused, helping the person to get to that space in which they are actually able to move from that space where they're completely trapped and wanting to escape from, to a place where they can see that there are options out there. So the plan only comes after that. But again, sorry, I'm just kind of mentioning those things. They are really important, and we normally spend an hour going through each of those links in the chain. So 127, if you think about it, if you are doing that on the final day of discharge from an inpatient mental health facility, 7+ is the conversation that happens at the 7-day follow-up post-discharge. Like we all know that day 3 is the highest point of, it's from the National Confidential Inquiry in the UK. We know that day 3 is the highest frequency of completed suicides. So the 127 is kind of trying to make the first week safe. 7+ is the bit that is trying to make perhaps the next fortnight and the next month safe, or safe enough till the next point of contact. So this is another structured conversation, which I don't think we'll have time to cover today, but the practitioner holds a structure in their mind and acknowledges that it has been a difficult time, assures them that things will get better, makes them aware of what helps, hinders, and harms, and urges them to act on things that need doing, while appreciating their assets and strengths, reigniting their can-do spirit. Because when they come out of a ward, the first week is a tough week, and when you have your 7-day follow-up conversation, that 7-day follow-up meeting, it's a great opportunity to consolidate the work that has been done on the ward and to make the future safer. So that's kind of a chapter, a section within SAFE, but I don't think we will have time to go through that. So 4 components of SAFE: scenario planning, access to means, alcohol and other drugs, family, friends, and follow-up, and emergency plan. What we say is that if you haven't got the time to do all of this, the least you should do is the emergency plan. And that essentially is what to do in an emergency, who will I call, where will I go? At least answer those 3 questions. Right? So the whole structure of Protect is modularized. So depending on which setting you work in, you can do kind of the bare minimum, and I kind of divide it up into essential, desirable, and aspirational. So that is the bare minimum you would need to do. So the whole safety planning process involves recognition of triggers, early warning signs, internal and external coping strategies, limiting access to means, alcohol and other drugs, and creating a crisis or emergency plan. That's kind of the whole of it. So, we use something called a risk response balance sheet in SAFE, where you take the risk, break it down into smaller fragments, and try and respond to each aspect of the risk. Okay, moving on to 1 to 7. There are kind of 10 questions, as you see. Can be done in 10 minutes. You can take as long as you want to, but it can be done in 10 minutes. And as I said, the focus is first hour, 2 days, 7 days, and you systematically work through those questions. So it begins with that focus on that first hour post-discharge and the pragmatics of what may happen when a person goes to where they stay, right? Those are the first hour 3 questions in there. And remember, these questions are a lot about showing genuine concern. The fact that a fellow human being cares about my safety goes a long way, much, much further than any form filling that you can do. The 2-day questions establishes how the person will occupy themselves over the following 2 days and if they have the necessary supports. Then the conversation turns to how risk may fluctuate adversely over the coming week and how some of these risks can be mitigated. And finally, kind of question 10 is a catch-all question, a final chance to connect, show that you care, and cross-check safety, okay? So 10 questions in total. And remember that these questions, the questions are fairly easy to answer, but you are listening for a whole lot more than just the question, like how will you get to where you stay? The answer may be by bus, but that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for a whole range of things as to the person's ability to plan the future, the person's ability to kind of think about how they will get home, and so lots of different things. And we will touch on each one of those things that you can potentially listen to in a moment. So 1 hour. So the 3 questions in the first hour section all relate to the here and now. They're designed to build on the rapport that should have already been built during the assessment process in emergency department or during an inpatient stay. In some cases, the decision to send someone home may leave them feeling unheard and invalidated. So the 1 hour questions can then help to rebuild rapport with the display of genuine curiosity and human-to-human interaction. So getting back home, what's waiting there, and have they got all their stuff, is a simple but effective way to initiate a safety conversation. 2 days. So the 3 2-day questions will highlight what people will get up to and with whom, and do they have access to the things they need to live their life? Will they jump straight back into the problem that they came from, or is there some respite? So a minute is not enough to list all the people in the person's life. However, the sequence of 3 questions is the beginning of establishing their circle of trust. So the 2-day questions might also reveal the person's internal coping strategies, things that they can do for themselves, or external things that they do with others. 7 days. So as I said, now well established that 7 days post-attempt or 7 days post-discharge following an inpatient stay is an incredibly high-risk window. The same can be said of ED attendances. So most developed countries have now established a system of 7-day follow-up to account for this period of elevated risk. However, it does not address the intervening time window. As I was saying, day 3 is the highest risk. So the purpose of these 3 questions is to mindfully establish what might tip someone again into suicidal distress. So even the knowledge of this is helpful. However, it would be even better to work out ways to address the escalating distress if it happens, including what to do in an emergency. And 2 a.m. in the morning may not be appropriate time to think through worst case scenarios and what if situations, but spending a minute on how risk can fluctuate is incredibly protective. even if no immediate mitigation strategies are identified. For someone to think, oh, I did think through that with that ED practitioner. Oh, Sally, my case manager did say that, I might begin to feel unsafe when I start getting these debtors letters or the court date approaches. Even that insight is protective. So as a professional or service mitigating long-term risk in a person who has just presented in suicidal crisis, long-term risk, very difficult to mitigate, if not impossible. So beyond 7 days, there's just too many variables to take into account. So the dynamic nature of risk means that fluctuations cannot be rigorously accounted for. However, thinking through these 3 time compartments of a 1 to 7 can introduce a degree of rigor in mitigating clear and imminent risk. So the conversation is not a replacement for a full safety plan, but provides structure and assurance. Now, we'll look at each of these time compartments in more detail. So in the full program, when we run this, we kind of run a lot of kind of patient stories and we practice these things. Unfortunately, that's not possible to do in a 1-hour webinar. So let's just look at some of these questions in a little bit more detail. When you ask a particular question, what is it that you're listening for? So the first question, how will you get home? So one can answer this, as I was saying, with 1 or 2 words like walking, by bus, etc. So remember, it is a conversation. So follow up. There is the content of the answer, but there is also the way in which they answer it. Kind of remember to listen for hesitation and trepidation they may have. Do they generate confidence in you? Or do you get the feeling that they have no intention of returning back to a place of safety or their home? Are they going to self-harm right outside the emergency department? Are they going to stop at the next pub and get completely intoxicated and put themselves at risk? So the knowledge that you already have of the person will determine what is it that you are listening for. Because from the way in which they answer the question, you can get a sense of reflected intent and withheld intent, because there is stated intent as to what they want to do, but there is reflected intent from all the other actions and a sense that you get, your gut is very powerful. You get a sense of that withheld intent, and have they got the ability to think through what to do next and what to do next? It kind of gives you an idea about the person's problem-solving abilities as well. So question 1, how will you get to where you stay? It might reveal willingness to return to place of safety, their ability to get home. The time of the day might make you stop and think about, oh, it's 1 a.m. at night. Maybe this is not a great time to send them back home. It will give you clues to their preferred mode of transport, which means, it might answer questions like, will they drive again when they are in distress? If they are telling you that, oh, I've got my car parked in the hospital car park, so that means they're driven up in the midst of a suicidal distress. So that might mean another conversation about it. So that's question 1. Question 2, what will be waiting for you at home? Now, this is an incredibly, this could give you such rich information about the person. So clearly it can tell you about who's waiting there, from my dog, who's very receptive and, is my sense of comfort, to my husband with whom I had the argument which precipitated the suicidal crisis in the first place. You might get a situation where they have self-harmed and they have taken an overdose. The blood and empty packets are still lying there. And you kind of picking up the phone to someone at home, hey, has that been cleaned up? Might convey through your actions that you genuinely care about this person. Believe me, that goes way further than any risk assessment form that you would fill, that a fellow human being cares about my well-being, my experience. Okay, that is what relational safety is all about. You genuinely caring. In the core module, in Empathy in Action, which is the 4th chapter, we go through the values of relational safety, and we talk about how you convert those values into actual actions, into actual words, and we do a lot of scripted conversations work in there in terms of converting those values into actions, into your clinical practice. So these are just examples of that. So what will be waiting for you there? You might have an entire conversation about, Linehan's reasons for living versus dying, all that DBT focused work. Because what's waiting for you there may be reason for you to carry on and hang in there, or what's waiting for you there may be the stuff which actually wants you to take your life again. Family and their response, the aftermath of the suicide as our attempt, as I was saying. And very importantly, it might be that there's a gun there, or the noose that I made is still there. There's a whole bunch of tablets that are there. So is home a safe environment? Or has the person got access to means? Someone with diabetes might have a whole kind of refrigerator full of insulin in there. So very simple question, but you're listening for a lot more than just the answer. Remember, it's a conversation. Question number 3 about, have you got the things you need? It's, again, showing genuine curiosity. And I'm hammering this whole point home about genuine curiosity because that's where relational safety comes from. It can avoid pragmatic problems like if they had stayed in your ED overnight, right? Their phone might have no charge in it. So they cannot call the Uber that they intended to. So make sure that they have their follow-up appointment card and any leaflets that you wanted them to take so that they can connect up and get help. Stop and also think about the appropriate amount of medication when you're handing medication out, right? So this question, have you got all the things you need? So a lot, again, in there for you, not just for the person, so medication on a script, next appointment with details, have you returned their belongings, their mobile phone, all of those things, right? So it's a mindful moment for you as well as the person is answering that question, for you to kind of think through, particularly the stuff around how much medication am I handing out, or whoever is handing out. Simple question, but lots to look out for. I should mention that you'll keep seeing this slide coming through. So if you did want to kind of connect up with us, there are different ways to do that. But again, we have YouTube channel, Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those things. And my email's up there as well, but you can connect up on LinkedIn. Okay, let's take a look at the 2-day questions. It builds on the first hour. So 2 days is not so far ahead that the person cannot reliably answer them. And the simple nature of the questions keeps the conversation humanistic. So from the comprehensive assessment or their stay on an inpatient ward, the professional would already have a reasonable sense of the people who will be around and what they might do over the next 48 hours. However, it is important for the person in distress to answer them. It reinforces the future focus, past to future. There are people in my life who care and there are things to do. So when they answer these questions, it actually helps them reconnect those dots that actually my life is worth living. That's what you're trying to kind of get them towards. So have you got access to all the amenities, right? The things that you need, money, food, other things you need. So the question helps a smooth transition from first hour to 2 days. Basic necessities are often at the heart of a situational crisis. Now, asking about food and access to money also conveys that the professional cares. The question might need rephrasing based on the personal circumstances of the person. So are they returning straight back into a crisis, which resulted in feeling a suicidal crisis, or are the basic needs going to be met? Like if you are speaking to a really wealthy person, you might rephrase the question. But even those, I've had people who are quite well off, they've jumped into the river, they've lost their wallet, and they haven't got any access to their money. So, so don't assume. Maybe do ask that question about basic necessities, but kind of temper it according to what you know about the person. So working through Maslow's pyramid of needs is a good way to conceptualize situational crisis in which many people with suicidal distress present. So food on the table and shelter over one's head needs to be followed up with the ability to stay warm in winter or staying hydrated in summer. So these questions need to be adapted. So issues with access to money, payday. Okay, payday can decrease risk, but it can also increased risk, okay? Increased access to alcohol or drugs. So just be wary of that. Credit on the mobile phone, heating in winter, hydration in summer, sleeping rough, all of those things come into a situational crisis. Question 5 and 6, they highlight a range of risk mitigation strategies. So really important. So listen carefully to what the person volunteers. You will pull on these answers to this question when you talk to the person about addressing fluctuations in risk in question 8. So what will you be doing over the next 2 days? Like at times there is no respite from the crisis that the person is dealing with, and others may have the option to take a break, to recuperate. Think this through. Thinking it through may highlight a person's internal coping strategies and the barriers to using them effectively. It may be necessary to reinforce simple solutions that they can use. So internal coping strategies, like if there are early warning signs, that's what we recommend kind of drawing on. Now, they are incredibly important because every time you draw on an internal coping strategy and you manage to ride that suicidal urge, it's a signal to your amygdala that suicidal urges can be mastered. Okay, so we recommend writing down the top 5 internal coping things that the person can do by themselves. Okay, these are internal coping strategies. External coping strategies are things that the person does with others. So, excuse me, what will you be doing over the next 2 days? So, as I was saying, many might land right back into the crisis, which has precipitated after suicidal distress, or all those what-if scenarios. But have they got structure to the day? Have they got some internal coping strategies, distraction strategies? Can you identify 3 of them, and what are the barriers that might get in the way, right? Now, after internal coping strategies, you have a whole host of socialization strategies. Now, it's best to avoid places where there may be alcohol in the equation. And socialization strategies are not really about, talking to people about your crisis. They are about being around people. Now, this may be a cafe or a church or an AA meeting where you're just around people. And that in itself has healing and protective powers just by being around people. And you might get quite distracted from the suicidal urge, and the urge rises as a wave and falls down. We recommend trying internal coping strategies first, but if you can't, then you use the external coping strategies. We have an entire framework, really simple to use, called LOVE, where you list the people, you organize them on a matrix, you verify what they know using circles of trust and ways to engage them. We've got 15 minutes. We may be able to touch on it later on. So the next question, question 6, who will you be with? It tells you about socialization strategies, family and friends who are in their life, how much do they know? Can they share this in a crisis? And what would stop them from accessing means? Family and friends are a very important aspect of limiting access to means, because you can't kind of get control of the environment outside. You need to depend on family and friends for that. So the last lot of three questions relate to the 7 days, all about identifying what may make it unsafe again, and how should one respond to it. So this is what we think of as the what if scenarios. What if I can't sleep at night again and feel suicidal? What if my employers don't allow me time off? These are the things which are predictable situational crisis. What would make things unsafe, right? That's the question. And you're assessing the person's insight into dynamic risks. You should have a reasonable idea about what those what if scenarios are. And you're trying to see, can the person themselves say what they are? So potential situational crisis, triggers, early warning signs, you kind of reinforce the understanding. You may have the answers. Please don't kind of blurt out the answer, but help the person kind of connect those dots, okay? So conversation about monitoring internal state happens around this question. And when you do question 7, question 8 is about solution-focused work. And again, we haven't covered this today. We cover it in the first chapter of Aspire in acceptance, which kind of is primarily around solution-focused work. How you write a simple problem statement, do an options appraisal, list the top 3, verify their choice kind of through a vantage point strategy, and then you kind of enact the plan. And what you're trying to do using this solve approach is helping the person understand what to do when, right? So what you do when you are in an emergency is very different to what you do in the early stages of crisis, where you're using an internal coping strategies. When you have your early warning signs, that's when you're using your internal coping strategies. As it gradually moves towards a crisis, you are being around people, distraction, socialization, moving up into family and friends that you can trust and you can share with, till you're actually calling helplines, professionals, and you go to your A&E or emergency department. So how can we reduce it and make it less stressful? And there are a range of things where you're helping the person connect the dots. You're pulling on the answers of questions 5 and 6, which were to do with internal coping strategies and external coping strategies, and you're helping them connect the dots. You pin down the first strategy each type, and then in partnership, you co-produce solutions, for that barriers that might come up. So, and you're talking about the appropriateness of using each strategy. So different strategies to be used at different levels of distress. Okay. Question number 9, who will you ask for timely help? Very important question, because this is the foundation of your emergency plan, kind of the helplines, Samaritans, that kind of things. Like in the book, we have the this safety plan, which kind of people fill in. It can be folded into basically a wallet-size card. Sorry, can't seem to find it. There we go. So I don't know whether you can see it. So it kind of, when you fold it down this line, you kind of fold it and it's color coded. So you end up with this section, which is the visible bit. If you open out, we say that the bare minimum is this box here, the emergency box. This is what kind of at least the bare minimum that you would want to fill up. Sorry, I don't think it may be too legible, particularly if you're on a laptop, it would be a small screen. So who and how we ask for help at the right time. You reinforce the natural circle of support, you reinforce the professional circle of support, reinforce helpline and emergency numbers, and you reinforce mode of transport in an emergency. Really, really important. This is kind of the bare minimum that you should be doing, which is the emergency plan, right? This box here, bare minimum. Someone in suicidal crisis, you're letting them go. Please don't let them go without answering this question. And it's the same spiral diagram, but presented in a much more simplistic way. What do you do when you're safe? What do you do when you're on edge? What do you do in a crisis? What do you do in an emergency, right? So what I'm saying is at least fill up the emergency, but best would be you fill up all 4 aspects of that safety plan. So final question, question number 10 is the final. It's a very powerful question that displays your genuine desire to help. It is meant as a cross-check. But if there are late revelations, which there might be, because when you go through the 1 to 7, you are building rapport, right? You kind of, the person begins to think, oh, this person really cares for me. So they might tell you at that point, I do have a noose at my home that I made. Please take the time. Otherwise, there's no point of asking this final question. Is there anything else you want to share, or I should have asked that I haven't, right? It's a loaded question, but it's meant to kind of get you, one final chance. And often people would share stuff which they haven't. So it reinforces relational safety. It might reveal withheld intent after that deepened rapport. Take the time and reinforce hope. Make an explicit promise of recovery. So reasons for staying safe, their strengths, assets, and that there is hope. Okay, so to bring it all together, so 1 to 7 is a time-limited approach to safety planning. Given how dynamic risk is, any attempt to make it safe forever is often so daunting that it pushes the clinician into a rationalizing space where they downplay the risk. A very simple fix for this is to focus just on the next 7 days, because that is doable, or until the next appointment, as the case may be. Trying to make it safe forever, as it says on the slide, is a fool's errand. Don't engage with that. Time limited, address clear and imminent risk. So it takes very little time if one knows the history, It is an intuitive conversation aid, collaborative, provides structure and sequence, easy to use, and requires very limited training. Still got 8 minutes left. I wonder whether we break for questions or...
There are so many questions coming in, really. A lot of people saying thank you and what a wonderful presentation. There was one just asking about the book itself, how they're able to get hold of it.
Yeah, so the way to kind of get hold of the book is, right, I think let's actually cover through some of the resources that are available.
Manaan, you can send that to me later and I can forward it on to everybody afterwards if that's easier.
Yeah, so if you go to the site progress.guide, the bookstore is on there. They're available on Amazon, so they could get it on Amazon. Also, kind of on the website, there are a number of courses, all the different courses that we deliver. There are online courses as well, which are actually quite useful. For example, the Safe 1 to 7 conversation course that I was talking about. That's this course, which is the entire curriculum. Things that I was talking about: presence, process, practice, plan. The safe components of it, which we haven't covered: scenario planning, access to means, family, friends, follow-up, and the emergency plan, and then the whole of the 1 to 7. We've got a whole host of stuff on Vimeo for those who kind of can get in contact with Grow, and we can set up training programs through Grow for the different modules, whether we kind of do it kind of in small components or do the whole kind of 2-day, 3-day training programs. But again, you can get in touch with Fiona and Sean from Grow regarding those things. And of course, I did promise I'll put my kind of mobile on the chat again if people had questions, or particularly if something was triggering from the conversation today. I'm more than happy to be contacted about that. So
we've had someone ask, they're curious as to know, what do you do for yourself when one of your clients does commit suicide?
So, very good question, and a tough one, because I think the last person I lost professionally was in 2016, and it was actually 3 months since I had seen the person, and the person had moved on to another team as well. But you do end up kind of going into a fairly dark place, actually. And I've been a psychiatrist for over 2 decades. And you go, like, you read all your notes, you kind of, should I have done, and I do this for a living. I kind of, on my LinkedIn profile, it says suicidologist. And even I can't help it. Like, what did I miss? What should I have done differently? All of that happens. I must say that I'm quite fortunate to be surrounded by very, very supportive colleagues, and I often find solace in my colleagues. I talk to my colleagues. As a director of the service, I often meet with people, with families who have, through the open disclosure process, regarding what we should have done differently, and to initiate the process of healing for them. And it is quite challenging. It is one of the most challenging meetings that we have, and one of the most challenging things as a psychiatrist that we go through, or anyone working in mental health or healthcare generally. There is a section in the assess module called Creep, Crash, Crawl, in which we specifically cover this aspect of it, how our risk-taking goes up over a period of time, and how that risk-taking, it actually kind of sets us up to fail. Sorry, I just thought, given the question was asked, I will find Creep, Crash, Crawl. Sorry.
No worries.
So, and we kind of talk about this, that when you see, if you're putting on weight 50 grams a day and you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you actually see? You see exactly the same. Spotting slow but steady changes demand a degree of mindfulness. But if we're putting on 50 grams a day times 365, that's around 18 kilograms. Now, if you were to carry 18 bricks, each weighing 1 kilogram, most probably you will have a coronary, right? Step changes makes us hyper aware of the change phenomenon. And kind of when we are dealing with people in suicidal crisis, every day you are seeing someone who is suicidal, your kind of risk taking goes up, gradually goes up, and your amygdala gets desensitized. But of course, it's only a matter of time before there is a crash, something bad really happens and you enter into that dark space of soul searching, and kind of then there is the investigation that happens. And what then happens is your amygdala gets really sensitized to risk. And your risk-taking decreases and you enter into that crawl phase. And that's why things like the just culture is really important around restoring your confidence. So this phenomenon called creep, crash, crawl is there pretty much all across mental health. And it is important to be aware of it, be wary of it, because when you get into that crawl phase, not only is your practice affected, but it actually affects the recovery of the person. It does affect the recovery of the person, and your desire for safety gets in the way of the person developing self-reliance. So sorry, that was off a tangent, but the question reminded me of creep, crash, crawl phenomenon. So I just thought I'll quickly kind of share that.
Well, we've got 1 minute to go, but I've just got one more that someone has queried whether COVID has made you have to adapt your approach in any way.
Actually, from a relational safety point of view, COVID has been a great leveler. COVID has shown us that the things that matter to you and me as healthcare professionals are the same things that matter to people in suicidal distress, right? Staying safe at work, staying safe, worrying about bringing back COVID back home to my family, worrying about having a job, or worrying about the impact of it, the unprecedented nature of COVID. COVID has actually been a great leveler, and we have all been, of course, the boats that we are on are different, but we have been in the same storm, all of us together. So in many ways, COVID has shown us that we're all humans going through the journey of life, and kind of the things that matter to people in suicidal distress, kind of family, home, work, health, are the same things that matter to you and me. So from a recovery point of view, or for recovery philosophy, in a weird kind of way, it has leveled the playing field, and the imbalance that exists between service provider and those who are in receipt of services, it's kind of leveled it a little bit, in my opinion. And we have been forced to draw on people's strengths and assets, because when you are operating through telehealth and when you're not able to review people so regularly, you kind of have to draw on their strengths and assets. So it has forced us to behave in a way which perhaps we might not have done if COVID hadn't come our way. Horrible thing to say, but but in a weird way, there are certain things that we can learn from COVID.
Absolutely. So true. Well, we are just after 1 o'clock, so that's perfect timing. Thank you so much, Manaan. It's been an absolute brilliant session. As you can see from the chat, there's lots of thank yous and people in saying how much they've enjoyed it. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Manaan, for your time today. And I wish you all well for the rest of the day.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of GROW.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.